Hey everyone, welcome back to Mantle Mondays. Today we're joined by Cato Pastoll, the co founder and CEO of Loop, a modern global banking platform built for Canadian founders who run businesses that go across borders. Stick around till the end to hear more about Mantle's partnership with Loop. But let's dive in. Kato, it's great to have you on. Thanks again for your time. To kick things off, I'd love for you to walk our audience through what is Loop, what's your background, and how'd you get things going? And I realize this could be a very long story, but would love to hear a summary of it.
Yeah, maybe very quick background on my story. I grew up originally in the UK, born and raised in London. My parents are entrepreneurs, so I grew up in a small business family. Most of my childhood was spent working in the family business, so I got very close to work and entrepreneurship, and both the challenges as well as some of the fun that comes with building a company. And that, in short, is what inspired me to build a company in a space which is ultimately geared to help entrepreneurs and help businesses be successful. If we look at the world today, one of the kind of challenges and passion areas for me is how financial services are managed by businesses as they build and grow their companies. I developed an interest in kind of banking and financial services as well as in technology. And that intersection seemed like a really interesting space for me to spend some time in. And as I dove into some of the problem sets or problem areas that many companies have, one thing that became apparent is that most banks today are still local by default, as I call it. So if you're a bank, your entire infrastructure is really built to one single country. But most businesses today, whether you're in software, e-commerce, manufacturing, etc., you have service businesses. Most of those businesses are dealing with vendors, employees, customers that are global and all over the world. And that creates an enormous amount of friction and pain points for both entrepreneurs and finance teams that are managing these businesses because their customers and their businesses are global, but their financial services providers tend to be local. And so as you expand and grow, you end up with a number of different products and services that you use to manage your money. And what we're trying to do is eradicate a lot of the cost and the friction and time wasted when it comes to managing your money as you do business across multiple markets. So that's ultimately kind of the problem that we're solving with Loop. And what we offer is a comprehensive banking solution. So you can use us to get operating accounts in different countries. You can use us to manage receivables, manage expenses. So we have both account payable via corporate cards as well as other products, foreign exchange, and anything else that you can really think of that you need to manage a business across borders.
Awesome. Great to hear. And being at a startup myself where I had to build some of those processes in the early days, I know exactly what you mean. And it makes a lot of sense. It's 2025 and it's shockingly difficult to do something as simple as collect a card payment, collect a wire transfer, and get EFT and ACH depending on which side of the border you're on and more. That makes a lot of sense. Great to hear that you're going after this sort of legacy world that is in desperate need for innovation. Knowing what you know now, we'll sort of jump into hindsight a little bit here. What is something you wish you would have known before founding Loop that would sort of maybe have changed your journey or saved you some time and trouble or more?
Yeah. I think, especially as a first time founder, when we originally started the business, you have a vision for what you want to build or the problem that you're solving for. And I think it can be challenging to reorient or pivot that vision according to what customers need. And a little bit more specifically, the first version of our business model was not what I described to you. We actually started out as a lending company. We were providing loans to SMBs, and it took us a bit to adapt and expand our horizons in terms of the product and what we're offering. I think we ultimately can now say that we made the right decision, but the way maybe would have short circuited that is by just spending a lot more time in the early days, like living and breathing your customers businesses. So for us, a story that I like to tell a lot about how we started transitioning to what is now Loop is a few years ago, I was sitting in the office of one of our customers and I noticed they had a huge stack of checks sitting on their desk. And I asked them, why is there a big stack of checks sitting on your desk? And they basically explained that they have a number of customers in the US. This is a Canadian business and they're doing business in the US. And those customers send them checks because they have no way to collect an ACH from those customers. And even worse, their bank that they work with, like their local branch, only accepts US dollar check deposits on Mondays. And they hold those checks for 15 business days post deposit date. So they have to collect all these checks, go in on a Monday into the branch, deposit them, wait 15 days for their money. And obviously for me living in the space and understanding how this works, that was like a light bulb moment of, wow, this is a huge pain point for this company and we can solve this. But I wish I had done that earlier, which was like just go sit and go meet face to face and be in the offices of your customers. Just by sitting there and noticing that stack of checks on the company's desk, that was a light bulb moment for me to realize, like, okay, that's a real pain point we can solve. And that's a lot better and faster than you're building a product and waiting for feedback or trying to sell and not having a successful sale. It's a lot better if you can just short circuit the problem by like basically living inside your customers.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. You'll laugh at this, but when we first started Mantle, our original thesis was cap tables on the blockchain, with the idea of it being immutable with perfect audit records. But to your point, you live in your customer's shoes and you realize, well, what they really want is an accurate cap table, and whether or not you use blockchain is not that relevant, at least in most cases. So, totally relate to that. And I think it's something a lot of founders, even repeat founders, sort of discover, right? Like it's just one of those things where you have to, even if you've cultivated the muscle to do so, you have to kind of go through the actions and build that empathy and sit through the customer thing. Speaking of checks, I learned this a while back when I was deep in billing and payments. Apparently, there are these check processing plants all around North America, and one of the largest ones is actually close to us, close to home in Mississauga, and it like processes all the checks from like all the banks, right? And it's just very human power, tons of people looking at every physical check, like looking at them individually, the front and the back and the signature, etc. You know, big business.
It's actually quick comment on that. Like a little segue of what you just described is how like most businesses still work today. And
For
even
sure.
though we have AI and amazing workflow management you can build, when you go look inside the finance team or you look at like what a Fortune 500 company does for treasury management as they expand internationally, you find dozens and dozens of people moving money across different markets and doing these things that could be totally automated entirely manually. And I think that check example is just one good example of there's so much room to run in financial services and making things more efficient.
For sure. And I sort of understand and respect why there is such rigor around the process. But to your point, I do think, and I think we all know this, right? Like the adoption curve kind of just tells you everything you need to know. With certain industries are always going to be on the tail end of that. And that's why we need entrepreneurs to push things forward. Um, Switching over to sort of building and scaling, right? Like this is something that's on every founder's mind. So, with respect to the team, what was your approach to hiring, let's say, the first 10 or so employees? And is there anything you would have done differently in terms of your recruiting process?
Yeah, I mean, early days, again, didn't have a huge network at that time, didn't know a lot of people building. And so it was a lot of luck and opportunistic things, right? Like, we got connected to people through a few mutual connections. We put up this was quite a while ago, but we put up some postings on, some startup job boards and got connected to some really interesting people. So honestly, it was a lot of happenstance and just lucky coincidence of meeting great people. I think if I was to do it again today, I would probably, as like, a first time founder, I'd probably be a little bit more intentional about the way that I go about it. I think we got lucky and met great people, like I said, through word of mouth and connections and job boards and that type of stuff. But I think, now I would really be a little bit more specific about like what is the particular, type of profile or persona. Am I looking for someone that's like, been through YC. I'm looking for someone who has been at another successful startup that wants to come into do it again. I think that's something that maybe I was a little bit less intentional about in the early days. That today I would definitely put more thought to as as I'm kind of building out a team.
It's so difficult, right? Like we talk about this at Mantle all the time, specifically in context of all our clients who are reaching out and asking us, how do I allocate equity? And one of the common pieces of advice we give is allocate it based on expectation of future performance. But how do you predict that? If you can predict the future, you can do a lot of things right. It is definitely, yeah, I totally hear you on that. Um, Related to that, how do you retain top talent? Like, even if you kind of stumble your way across it, like at some point you realize, hey, some folks on the team or the entire team is really awesome, but you do need people to hang on for a while to help you in your journey. How do you think about retaining talent?
Yeah. I think the best thing ultimately is alignment to the mission and vision of what you're building. Um, you can talk about 100 creative ways to retain people, but I think nothing is as effective as having your clear stated mission, and you find people that are really passionate and excited about that mission and want to be a key part of making their mark by building something great that ultimately helps the end customer that we're trying to help. And so, in our case at Loop, business owners, entrepreneurs are at the core of everything that we do as a company, and making sure that we make their lives easier, successful is at the heart of that obsession with the customer is at the heart of the product and how we think about building what we do. And I think you have amazing retention when you have people who have that shared vision with you. Obviously, tactically, you can think about that alignment as well through things like equity and having people aligned with our business as we grow and scale through ownership in the business, which is I think a really direct way to draw that line between I care about this business, I care about the customers, I care about the product that we're building, and I want more and more ownership in that company. I think that's ultimately what creates good retention is when people feel like they have that ownership and are not don't feel about it don't feel like it's a transactional relationship. Transactional relationships, they can last, but they usually have a shorter lifespan than ones that are more emotional. And I think why I come to build Loop every day is more emotional. It's more because like I really care ultimately about who we're building the product for, and the more people you can have around the table that also care, I think the more likely you are to have great retention and have people want to stick around.
Absolutely. How large is your team right now?
We're a small, scrappy team. We're about 30 people at Loop.
A
Yeah,
good
we've
size.
tried to, yeah. We you try to punch above our weight and be as resourceful as we can. But yeah, we're growing the team, and we're always on the lookout for great people to help us grow and scale.
Absolutely. No, that's a really good size because once you get past that, quote, two pizza team size, maintaining work culture and more and just broad communication can start to get challenging. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the product itself and the platform, right? So for every startup founder, hitting that product market fit is sort of the dream in the early days. What were some of the signals you saw at Loop that made you think, okay, like our MVP, there's something here. Let's get into growth phase. Let's start scaling this.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like a good growth chart that starts to, asymptotically, yeah, grow up and to the right. Yeah, I mean, we launched the first version of Loop in April 2022, um, and that was kind of like when we came out of a beta, had a few customers, um, and very quickly in the first few months after that, we basically were putting nothing into marketing. We'd done like no go to market. It was just like that initial cohort of customers. And we were just getting a massive amount of people signing up, inbound referrals, people reaching out to me being like, is this product real? Like, can I actually sign up for it? Is it going to work? And that momentum then started to lead into like that growth where the company about 4x and from that point to the end in the first 6 months of the business. So obviously off a relatively small number, but I think that was the like clear inflection point to okay, this thing has legs in terms of we know that we're clearly solving for a challenge or pain point that people are actively seeking out a solution for. And I think whenever you have a pull, I like to describe it as like, pull from the market versus you're having to push your message out into the market. I think that's always a really great sign that you're going to have legs to be able to scale it. One thing that I've learned in building companies is that there's going to be multiple inflection points along the road. It's actually, I think it's very rare that you just have like a single up and to the right line. In reality, it tends to go like this, boom, and then flat, and then boom, and then flat, and then boom. Because as you're growing and scaling, you have to figure out that next customer segment, or that next product unlock, or that next growth unlock that's going to drive the next phase of growth. So it's not. I wouldn't say it's always an up and to the right line, but I think that first experience of you know your hold on to the seat growth is the thing that gives you the signal that like there's something you're building that people really love.
That's amazing, and I totally agree with you on the graph piece. And my theory is it's a revisionist correction. Just smooth out the graph,
Yeah.
make it look a little nicer. It kind of averages to the numbers that represent reality.
Zoom out the time series and it always looks just nice and smooth, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, yeah. And then people get clever with it. It's like, oh, logarithmic scale. Like, what? Back to math class. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about fundraising and cap management. You raised your second round. I think it was a little over a year ago. Fundraising is obviously a balancing act. Founders have to juggle their time and energy across a few different buckets. How do you think about like navigating that and organizing it and executing on it? And how do you decide what to focus on between your product, your team, or fundraising?
I think, yeah, a couple thoughts. The first thing is like the question I always ask is like, why are you fundraising? And like, what's the purpose? What's the intended goal? And then outcome of, okay, if I raise this much capital in this period of time, it's going to lead me to be able to do X. And I think you have to be really intentional first about, like any going into the fundraise cycle is not just I'm fundraising because that's the startup thing to do or because after series A comes series B, but rather because like I have a very specific intention in terms of like what that's going to do for the business and what it's going to unlock for me. So I think that's the first question. I think once you've answered that question, you have a clear goal in mind. I think that's when you need to, as a founder, basically get really disciplined on running it as a process and being like pretty much full time on doing it. I think, lesson I've learned is when you try do it in parallel with other things or side of your desk, it's just never going to get the level of attention and effort it deserves. So I think like, if you can be really intentional, know who your targets are, how much you're trying to raise and what time frame you're trying to raise it in, and then you can go to market with that very clear story and have conviction in it. I think you're much more likely to, spend a shorter cycle, like for example, 3 months getting it done versus slowly doing it for 9 months and dragging out a process that may or may not work. So I think that's kind of my tidbit of advice on how to do it. Now, by no means have I or I think anyone else perfected it. I think there's always a lot of externalities and variables that you can't control in a fundraising process. But I think like most things, just having a clear plan from the get go is probably what's most important.
That makes a lot of sense. I think without that concerted effort, you're right. Like it can drag and it may not even close neatly, right? Like you have investors coming in 6, 8 months later saying, wait a minute, like, does this valuation cap make sense anymore? Right. And you just, as a founder, you just don't want to be in that position. For first time founders, what advice would you give them in terms of getting started on this process? Like, what do you look for in an investor? How do you find investors in the first place? Of course, starting with the purpose,
Yeah.
as you said, but then how do you go to the next one?
I mean, the advice I would honestly give is go talk to other founders who have done it because you'll never get as honest advice as in like, a one-to-one coffee or a quick 15-minute chat with someone who's been through the cycles, who's raised rounds of capital before, who's successfully done it and unsuccessfully done it. I think that's the best advice I would kind of give to anyone that's looking to raise a round of funding. I like I said before, really intentionality around like why you're doing it is where it comes from because one person's story is going to be very different than another person's story and two people running the same company could have totally different fundraising strategies. So I don't think that there's like a one size fits all. So I think it's about like information collection, get as much data as you can from other people who have done it before. So you can kind of plot out your scenarios. This is my scenario A, my scenario B, and scenario C. And then you can strategize accordingly. I think like one thing that's been helpful for me is also always thinking about like, and some people would probably argue against this, but for me, it's like, okay, what's a scenario where you don't raise capital? Like, and what does that look like? And is there a different path you can take? I think like thinking creatively or a little bit outside of the box. I think you know, and that's one way that I like to do it, which is like financially modeling out what a non-fundraise scenario could look like. I think you can also be helpful in other businesses that might be different scenario analysis, but I think that that's a helpful starting point when you're going down a fundraising journey.
That's a great way to think about it. And we actually get a lot of our clients reaching out to us because if they don't have that founder network, they're trying to ask us for advice or pointers. And now that we have plenty of data points, we feel like we're able to help them out in any way possible. Speaking of capital management, Loop uses Mantle. How has your experience been in what should founders be thinking about in terms of getting their capital organized? Like, why should they move up from a spreadsheet? What should they look for? Any pointers there?
Yeah, yeah, no, we're a happy Mantle customer. We moved from a spreadsheet to Mantle. I think one of the challenges for us is like as you raise more rounds of funding, it starts to get a little bit more complex. And as you think about managing an option pool, which is important to us, and like seeing vesting schedules, what your remaining allocations look like, what a waterfall might look like, and trying to do some scenario analysis or modeling of that. It just gets more and more complex in a spreadsheet. And so if there's a standard piece of software that can help you do all of that and save time, it seems like a no-brainer to be able to do that. And so that was our rationale for wanting to implement a system. And obviously, we got connected with you at the right place and right time. And yeah, have definitely been a happy customer.
Love to hear it. Thank you for that. To close this out, we'll just go through a couple of rapid fire questions. So no need to overthink it. Just give us the first answer that comes to your mind. It's going to be a fun one. Who do you turn to for advice when you're facing your toughest challenges?
My old co-founder.
Nice. Is a calzone a sandwich?
No.
Favorite playlist on Spotify when you're locked in?
Workout playlist.
Nice.
Yeah.
And before we sign off, could you share any details on the partnership between Mantle and Loop and why founders should be excited for it?
Yeah, very excited about this. So, we are creating an offer for any startup founders that are using Loop or Mantle, where if you pay for your Mantle subscription using a Loop card, so Loop card is a corporate expense credit card that helps companies manage their corporate spend. And so we have a promotional offer that will be live very soon, where if you are a customer, like I said, of either Mantle or Loop and you use the Loop card to pay for your Mantle subscription, you'll get a rebate on the Mantle annual subscription. So a super great benefit for anyone who's a customer of either platform. And if you're not already a customer, an incentive for you to sign up and become a Loop customer or become a Mantle customer if you're not one already.
Yeah, it's a great offer. We're pretty excited as well. It's basically 10% off. It's not a deal folks can get in any other way. So I'm glad we've been able to come together and construct this offer for the ecosystem here. And yeah, looking forward to more folks taking advantage of it and signing up for Loop. Love it. Thanks a lot for your time, Cato. I want to be respectful. We're basically at time. This was a great chat. And
Yeah.
where do folks go when they want to learn about Loop?
Our website is bankonloop.com. So if you Google Loop Financial or Bank on Loop, you'll find us. Also connect with us, our team on LinkedIn, where we're pretty active and always posting about what's up and coming in terms of Loop. We're always releasing new features, and love engaging with the community as well. Like I said, we're here to build for entrepreneurs, and excited about what's to come, both with the Mantle partnership and everything else we have in store at Loop.
We are excited as well. Thank you again. And that's it for Mantle Mondays. We'll see you all next week.